Texas Business Minds, a presentation of the Texas Business Journals. Brought to you by Texas Mutual Insurance Company, a workers' comp provider committed to helping companies build a stronger, safer Texas. It's been over 2 years since we touched base with Tanya Ragan. At last check, she was juggling tenants and projects at the outset of the pandemic. In this episode, Dallas Business Journal managing editor Rob Schneider reconnects with Tanya for an update on development in the downtown core and her optimistic outlook.
For Tanya Ragan, the transformation of downtown Dallas has been a change she's both witnessed as a resident and a developer. We talked to Tanya, president of Dallas-based Wildcat Management, for this podcast in 2020, and we wanted to revisit some of the same topics we did in April of that year and ask her what she thinks about the future of development, both for downtown and the West End, where she has a lot of activity and witnesses a lot of that. Tanya, so before the coronavirus, downtown Dallas was in the midst of a years-long revitalization. A larger population was calling downtown their home. It's often said there were more dogs than people downtown. And we talked about that in April 2020. Looking 2 years ahead now, where do things stand in 2022? How are things on the downtown revitalization? And where did COVID do? And where do you think the future lands for that?
Well, downtown is back. You walk around in the evenings, you walk around on the weekends, things are active. Our resident population is growing. We have several new businesses. Certainly there has been a lot of new developments announced, and we are back in business and things are active.
Very good. And I think especially also in the West End, where you have the historic Purse building. And tell us about the West End and where things stand from where they were 2 years ago.
Sure. I think something that is really interesting coming out of the pandemic is this idea of live, work, play. And certainly that's not a new concept. We heard it a lot for the last probably decade downtown, even so pre-pandemic. But what we found during the pandemic and coming out of it is this real desire and want for both residents and folks that live and work downtown, wanting a real, true sense of community, really wanting to be engaged and get to know both their neighbors, get to know, the local business owners, local restaurants, and really being after this authentic experience, if you will, of both living downtown, whether that's the West End, whether that's the Farmers Market, or whether it's any of the other districts within their central business district, this real sense of wanting an authentic experience.
And do you think that's happening now? I mean,
absolutely.
Are there still things that lack from that? Or what does Dallas need to still do to get people to feel better? Or do you think that they're pretty far along there?
Well, I think, for one, downtown, we need to improve some of our transportation and improve some of our transit. We are seeing both before, prior, and even more so today, the migration of young folks and companies relocating to both to Dallas and to our downtown. These young people and these companies coming either from these other urban markets and or some of these other areas of the country have a different expectation of what they want from our downtown. They're coming into this market, a lot of them not having a car, wanting to be very, very close to where they live and work. Those folks have a very different idea of what it means to walk 3 or 4 blocks. They have a different idea of what it means to utilize transportation. Certainly, that is a long-term plan for our city and for downtown. The expanded D2 DART rail, the McKinney Avenue trolley that is proposed to come down Elm Street, certainly the high-speed rail. But, to move these projects along and to help expedite some of these, there's sort of this balance of we have a tremendous amount of development happening downtown with a lot of new projects. We have a a very, very rapid increasing residential population. There is a need for a larger supply of apartments and places for these folks to live. Our rents we're seeing are up 50% for market rate for the residential. And, I think that from a leadership standpoint, we need to expedite some of the transportation and some of that conversation around transit, or it's going to be a lost opportunity. And I think that is probably the top at my list as a need to meet these expectations. So that is number one. I would say, number two would be probably more residential, which I know that we are certainly working on. Also bridging some of the gaps between the various neighborhoods. We have pockets of areas downtown that still need to be developed. And you look at the size of our city and where we rank across the country, we are probably one of the few cities this size that has this type of available land still available for development in their downtown at these prices. So certainly you see a tremendous amount of investment happening from out of state and from other areas of the country. And I think that groups are certainly recognizing that.
In 2020, you took an active role with your tenants. Talk about how that relationship has continued over the last 2 years and where that relationship is. What has happened over the last couple of years with your tenants? What's the current state of your relationship with them? And what are the big things that your tenants are asking 2 years past the worst of the COVID?
Well, this is what is really interesting. A lot of our small businesses and a lot of my tenants are having record years. Even going into the end of last year, they were posting months that were breaking records. And some of the businesses this year have had months that have outpaced anything previously. And some of those have been in business for 20 years or longer. So what I find interesting is downtown, we really took a hard approach during the pandemic to really push our marketing efforts towards a support your local businesses, support downtown. And what we found was the resident population downtown really, really got behind our businesses. And for myself personally as a landlord, and I know several of the other landlords, we really wanted to ensure that we could assist our tenants to get them through that period, whether that was offering some concessions, whether that was getting creative with some of their structure of their leases. We did a variety of things. I know my company personally, I dedicated someone in my office specifically to act as a role to assist our tenants and our small businesses with everything from if they needed assistance with getting any grants, if they needed any assistance with any of their applications, with any of their banking relationships. We were essentially a counselor in this office in a lot of ways, to get everybody over the hump. But, I'm really proud to say that we did not lose one single tenant. And by taking those steps, they're just doing incredible this year. And I would say that as across the board downtown, with the residential population moving back to the core and moving back to the city, I think people are really, really wanting to get back out and be social and be active and attend events and attend our restaurants. And that is extremely evident with what is happening with these businesses.
Sure. Now, over the last 2 years, what do you think you've learned as an owner that's made you better going forward as things stand in the middle of 2022? Really the same for your tenants as well. And I would assume, just based on your last answer, that loyalty to downtown and to supporting downtown maybe wasn't as apparent in 2019 as it is now, because people understand why they need to do it. What are the things that have made you a better owner? And what do you think the things that have made your tenants better tenants just in the last couple of years?
Well, I will say this, real estate, entrepreneurship, these are relationship businesses. So, myself personally, I have always taken a very strategic approach also with the projects that I'm involved in, seeking out tenants and businesses and groups that I feel are a good match for either that location or that project. Less interested in just putting someone in to pay the rent, but really looking long term, whether that is a good match for that project. So I've always felt that I've had, a really strong relationship with both my tenants, but also within the community, being so involved with the revitalization efforts downtown. I will say that, 2019 going into 2020, we were going 100 miles per hour and things were rocking and rolling, and we had our processes and our procedures, and we were I thought things couldn't have been better, right? We were in the midst of finalizing a large lease on one of our projects and getting ready to go on to the next one. And man, it was just, it was fire, right? 2020 certainly was was definitely a reality check, and it makes you step back and really look at things from a different perspective. And coming out of the pandemic and going into 2021, we were trying to turn things on as fast as we could, whether that was with our hiring efforts or ramping up our marketing efforts. But reality was going into 2021 was just too early. And, I'm a big believer that whether it's the consumer or the community, the market sets the tone, and you really got to listen to that. You got to feel it, and you got to react to it. So coming into 2021, as hard as I wanted to ramp things up and to start, the market dictates it, and it just wasn't ready. So recognizing that, we kind of paused some of our efforts, and going into 2022 we've been pedal to the metal and, full speed, and really have seen a big difference in the level of activity and momentum going into this year that just didn't exist in 21.
So whereas things were deliberate now, you're really back to that same pace of before the pandemic. You think,
yeah, I would say absolutely. I mean, right now, today, it's almost like we've went full circle. We really are revved up and moving and operating like we were in 2019. And I sort of use this metaphor a lot with the team that, I come from an oil and gas background. And, when you shut things down, you can shut them down fast. Things come to a sudden halt and they're stopped. But once you decide that you're going to turn those pipes back on, and you start to turn things on and ramp back up, it just doesn't happen overnight. You got to find your pace, you got to find your momentum, and you got to start all the engines again. And essentially that's what we've been doing, and it takes a little time.
So one of the other things that has changed is really a hybrid work where working from home and the office is a mix. I'd say commercial real estate probably leans a lot more onto the office side of things and being in person and as you said, a relationship driven industry. How has the hybrid work changed what you're doing, either as an owner or as a developer or all of the above? How has that changed anything that your approach to anything over the last couple of years?
Well, so this is my perspective. One of the reasons why I attribute 2022 in being so active and momentum turning back on is because in-persons and because people are coming back to the office.
Right.
I know there is certainly a big push. There is with employees and with staff who have found that they like this hybrid or working remote or, a flexi type environment. But the reality is, in order to really to conduct business and to really be productive, in my opinion, you've got to be back to the office. And I believe, companies and leadership have certainly recognized that. I believe that's why we have seen increased activity with our tours and with some of the companies that are looking at, relocating downtown into some of our projects. The difficulty right now is that balance where, look, we need staff, right? we need to hire. A lot of us are short staffed. We're trying to hire. And there's this balance of recognizing that we need people back at the office. We need to have the team emphasis and the camaraderie and the collaboration that you just can't get on a Zoom call or working remote. But there's balance right now of how far you can push it with staffing and with the employee base. So look, in my opinion, I think you're going to see a big shift in the future of people coming back. I believe that that's already happening. It's just we are trying to find, we're trying to find the balance because we need staff.
Right. And I think you see it on the event side too, or just people getting together, whether it be, getting together for lunch or dinner downtown, or whether it be at events downtown or conventions or people coming from out of town to Dallas again. I mean, I think you're seeing a big push of that this year compared to even last year.
Yeah. And look, we need to do more to create that experience. And I think that is really evident in both the residential market, but also in the office market. Look, there is availability for office downtown, but what we're finding is, companies recognize that they need to provide something different for their employees to incentivize them and motivate them. And that is not monetary, that is in their experience, whether it is to come to an office that has some sort of perks, whether it is being in a low-rise office where you can walk outside your door and either be close to your work or have a local pub or a bar or easy transportation or things all at your fingertips rather than go into a high-rise, park in a sterile garage and walk into your space, whether it's a cool space with eclectic features, or whether that's natural light, exposed brick, whether it's the location. I think that employers are recognizing that they need to offer some sort of authentic experience to their employees, just the same as we need to do that with our neighborhoods and our residential. I really think that is the key to getting staff back to the office. I mean, I've even noticed myself personally. We've been hiring for the last really 18 months. And what I have found, even in my own internal recruiting efforts, that, a lot of the young people, they want to be downtown and they're romanced by downtown. And when they come and they interview or they see the office or they visit our location, it is an incentive for them in the space that we are. And the idea of working and living downtown. Right.
No, I think I would agree with you. So in the past, you talked about navigating the boys club in commercial real estate as a woman, maybe being the only woman in a room for times. How has that evolved over the last couple of years? Any changes, any improvements in that area?
I would say that we have lost a lot of women, especially management and executive women coming out of the pandemic. I'm hopeful and optimistic that we will see more of them return. I think it's an interesting dynamic that traditionally women they're sort of the rock of the house, right? When we went to a environment where kids and children were either schooled at home or parents were on call to go pick up their children, some of the school from home. Naturally, I found that a lot of the husbands were the first to go back to the office, especially with some of my peers. I've noticed this, and it was just natural for a lot of the women to make the choice to take longer or step back and take a more part-time or limited type of role. So we'll see over the course of the next year or two where all this shakes out. I'm seeing more of my female peers this year, certainly than I was last year. But I think that for young women in this space, I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of opportunity. Tremendous. Those that hit hard come in extremely ambitious, come in motivated, they network, and they seize this opportunity coming out of the pandemic, because I really see so much opportunity. If they grasp it, I think there's an opportunity to advance extremely quickly. I think for women in management or executive type roles who maybe took a step back or went either part-time or more limited, I think it is going to be more difficult to enter some of that space. So time will tell. We will certainly find out. But I know, myself personally, man, I worked hard during the pandemic to keep everything, all the glue in place and to guide everything through. But I've really worked hard the last 6 months, just with the grind of getting everything back to pre-pandemic and try to ramp things up to capitalize on some of the opportunities I see ahead that I want to be ready for.
Tanya Ragan joining us. In our next segment, we'll hear about projects she's excited about when Texas Business Minds continues.
In Texas business, success doesn't happen by accident. But with Texas Mutual Insurance Company as your workers' compensation partner, business is safer, stronger, better. Learn more at texasmutual.com/better.
So in terms of projects you're excited about that are going on now or in the future, let's talk about that. We've written a lot about your development of the historic Purse Building, and you are a big advocate for the West End and for downtown in general. Talk about the places that you're either personally or of people doing projects that really have you excited right now.
Sure. Well, something that I'm extremely excited about personally for Wildcat Management is we have a mixed use project planned for Mansfield, Texas. We actually have been out there the last several months working with the city and getting ready and ramping up to prepare that project for next summer. It is the largest undeveloped tract within the city limits that we have assembled over the course of the last 10 years. It's a 45-acre tract just adjacent to the downtown Mansfield, where you see a tremendous amount of development, like all towns and even some of these, suburb towns. Their historic downtowns are finding a revival with people who want to be able to walk and to the entertainment district and have a more walkable downtown neighborhood. So that project is a combination of retail, office, and single family. And you will hear more about that as we go into next year. We are extremely excited about that project. We had planned to get to that project late 2020. So we got a little delayed, but hey, it's happening. We're getting to it. We've seen a tremendous amount of activity at the Purse Building. Certainly that was a project that we thought that we had finished. We could see the finish line. And with the pandemic, we paused and ramped back up late last year. So we've done probably 40 or more tours in that building in the last 6 months. We've had some really great conversations. What is unique about that space is it is a very unique type of product with its location on Elm Street. It really takes an anchor type of tenant that wants 30,000 square feet or more of office, very industrial with the exposed brick, natural light, high ceilings, great location. We are actively pursuing companies that either want to relocate downtown or are relocating within the North Texas market. A lot of activity there. As far as downtown Dallas, I am extremely high on what I see happening on the southeast side of downtown. Certainly been extremely involved with the conversations surrounding the new convention center and the district surrounding that. I actually serve on a stakeholder group that is involved with a lot of that conversation. That the new convention center will be on the ballot in November. Right now, We have a tremendous amount of support behind it. I really encourage everyone listening to vote to support it. That is going to be a game changer for that side of town. It is going to bring an incredible amount of development from residential to retail. What I really, really like about it also is the fact that it is going to bridge, whether it's the West End and Reunion to the farmers market to the south. It's going to fill in that area and connect those areas. It also will be a connector for the high-speed rail. It will also connect to the West End transfer station and some of the future darts. So extremely excited about that project. Also, there is an incentive behind that project that will benefit in a way to bring money and a percentage back into both South Dallas and to our area, that area of downtown, to incentivize more future development. I'm also extremely excited about New Park, which is sort of extended. That is Mike Hoke's project, extended just on the other side of the Convention Center district. Wildcat Management actually owns about 3/4 of a block that's just adjacent to New Park. We are part of that TIF district as well. I think that is also a great way to bridge in that side of town. I think that side of town historically has been a very, very underserved area, and it is a tremendous, tremendous opportunity to connect our south side. And of course, we've got a number of parks that have opened in the last 10 years. West End Square just opened in the last 12 months. We have another new park that is opening called Harwood Park that is over just adjacent to the farmers market, which will also bring a tremendous amount of activity. So I really see the growth on the southeastern side of downtown, just a big game changer for downtown. And, you know, those are all projects that I'm extremely excited to see take place.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, the high-speed rail has always been really a key part of that as well, and the terminal that could be a part of that as well. So that's going to be...
Look, to attract who we want to attract, whether it's relocations, whether it's education, whether it's companies relocating, whether it's resident. We talk about being a world-class city, but really to get our downtown where it's competitive, we need to have these things like the high-speed rail and the transportation and the connectivity. We need to expedite those things to really be competitive.
Very good. And for people who don't understand why we need a new convention center, they may say, what's wrong with our current convention center? What would you tell those people?
First of all, our existing convention center is on an island. And what people don't recognize, who maybe aren't spending a lot of time downtown, or who don't live here, or maybe who work here but go into their garage, or they leave, maybe haven't really had the full experience either as a visitor or as someone who lives here. The convention center is sort of on an island. And what I mean by that, it is not easily accessible. It is not easy to get to. There is little to no, zero retail around it. Probably the closest retail would be the Omni Hotel, which is next door to it. However, the Omni Hotel that is the nearest retail is not easy to get to. Crossing the street from a pedestrian standpoint, whether you are coming from the Lamar and the Cedar side, or whether you're coming from West End and Reunion, or whether you're even coming from downtown, all areas that we heavily market as being close to the convention center, in actuality, walking, the mobility and actually getting to it is extremely, extremely difficult. So from a competitive standpoint, when we are going out and we are marketing ourselves as a world-class convention city, the reason why we are even losing to Arlington or to Fort Worth or to any of these other markets is because we are not an easy city where our convention center is to get around. So by redesigning our convention center so it is part of our downtown and it is easily accessible will be a game changer in marketing ourselves for conventions. Now, adding another layer, we have a need for more residential. We have a need for more education space. We need more affordable housing. We need more places where people who work downtown, especially in some of our restaurants, retail, law enforcement, we need places where these folks can afford to live for our service industry. We also need more retail. So as part of this expansion with the convention center is a new district that will develop into these types of housing and additional retail. Then you add on the transportation and the connectors. So that will have a domino effect on all the other previous projects that I mentioned. I know that I get a lot of conversations and a lot of questions of, Tanya, you are fiscally conservative. You certainly have a strong opinion on where downtown Dallas, taxpayers and where Dallas taxpayers should spend their money. I'm not a big fan of raising property taxes. You're so fiscally conservative. Why and how are you getting behind the new convention center? Well, for all the reasons that I've stated, we've got to spend this money to develop it to get where we need to go. So for all those reasons, I'm pro-development and I'm behind this new convention center.
And to circle back to something you said earlier, not easy to get to, you aren't talking about a car. You're talking about where people live downtown compared to the convention center, or where they may be staying in a hotel downtown.
Yes,
right?
I'm talking about
like walking and just ease of access to that place.
I am talking all of the above. I'm talking mainly walking because we want to be a walkable city and we heavily promote ourselves. And there are some great areas downtown to walk. West End, so easy to walk, easy transportation, hotels in the area, farmers market, downtown core. But then you've got this convention center that's on this island with all this area around it that is slated to be developed. But we've got to bridge all that to really make it accessible. Absolutely.
So finally, what are the things that you personally want to see out of downtown longer term, 5, 10 years? What's your dream? 20 years from now, what's your dream for downtown Dallas? And what do you think all these things you're talking about that will get us to?
Ooh, what is my dream? Well, I can tell you, I look at things differently than I did in 2019. I will say that, and I don't think this is good, bad, it's indifferent, right? That I look at things in a lot of shorter term brackets than I did in 2019. Previously I would look at 5 years, 10 years. Now today I look at 3 months, 6 months, a year, 5 years. And frankly, one of the reasons why I do that is more positive because things are rapidly changing so quickly. I mean, what I love about this business and what I hate about this business is its highs and lows, and things are just extremely volatile and all over the place. And, it's incredibly exciting, but I don't think that is especially the case today. Every week it seems like, okay, what's happening with interest rates? What's happening with construction bids? What's happening with this letter of intent? What's happening with this tour? What's happening with this permit? I mean, talk about a moving target right now. Every week, it's like we just kind of throw everything up in the air and we're like, okay, where's everything landing this week? However, that's a good problem to have because it means we're really, really active and, we're busy. As far as what my dream is or what I see for downtown, I would say from a Wildcat Management perspective and for myself personally with my company, I have a strong desire to expand into some other markets. As much as I love downtown and have really enjoyed being a part of this revival, I have a lot that I want to do and a lot that I want to accomplish. So for myself personally, evaluating where I am and where I'm going, I have a desire to expand our efforts. I've started acquiring property before the pandemic in my home state of Minnesota. I started ramping up this project in Mansfield. I'm looking at other opportunities throughout the state. And I would like to take some of this formula that, I've been so fortunate to be a part of with making a difference downtown and apply this into some other markets. I found that I'm really, really good at it. I'm really good at building these communities and transforming some of these areas. And I'd like to pursue this into some other markets. So for myself, I think that revving things up and seeing the opportunity coming out of the pandemic, going back to my earlier comment for people getting involved in this business, I think setting the foundation today for the next 24 months ahead with some of what we see happening in the market, it's going to be a good time just to get out there, pound pavement, and build those relationships and begin networking for what lies ahead in the next couple of years.
Well, this has been a great conversation. I thank you for your time, Tanya. This has been really interesting and a good chance to kind of recap where things stand 2 years later.
Yeah. And for those that are listening, throughout Texas, we are so fortunate to be here in Texas. I mean, talking about the land of opportunity, right? I mean, from a staffing point, from a educational standpoint, as far as, our employee pool, from a cost of living, from a work ethic, and just from a economic development standpoint of the support that we get from leadership in the state, let alone all the tax incentives, right? We just are so incredibly lucky to be in Texas. And I encourage folks that are looking at relocating their business here or that are considering moving to Texas to absolutely come on over. We'll welcome you with open arms. Come on over.
There's a lot of them coming. That's great.
They're coming, boy. They're coming.
Well, thanks, Tanya. I appreciate your time, and it's a great conversation.
Thank you.
Wildcat Management President Tanya Ragan joining us. Thank you for downloading Texas Business Minds, presented by the Texas Business Journals, and brought to you by Texas Mutual Insurance Company, a workers' comp provider committed to helping companies build a stronger, safer Texas.